The Aurelian palace was a place of silver light and silence. Everything inside was bright, clean and cold, so perfect that even the air seemed afraid to move. Every step echoed across long crystal halls where humans were only servants, shadows among the shining aliens who ruled the stars. Among them was Eli Ward, a simple janitor from Earth. His work was small, his voice smaller. He swept, polished, and fixed little things no one noticed. To the Royal Aurelians, he was invisible. That was fine with Eli. He had come to this world as part of the human labor exchange, one of the many Earthlings sent to distant planets to work after the Great Wars ended. He had learned that silence kept him safe. Each morning, Eli woke before sunrise, washed with cold water, and put on his gray uniform. He liked working early, before the nobles walked the halls and before the guards started watching every move. The only sound he loved in the palace was the soft hum of cleaning drones and the quiet song of wind across the upper garden domes. But that day, something strange happened. As Eli cleaned the marble floors of the imperial nursery, he heard a small sound, a child's quiet sob. He paused, confused. No one was supposed to be there so early. He followed the sound and found a little figure sitting beside a shining pool. The boy's small golden crown had fallen beside him. His fine blue robe was wet from tears. Eli froze. He knew who this child was. Prince Oren, the youngest heir of the Aurelian queen. The boy couldn't have been more than 6 years old, but he carried the royal markings across his pale skin. No servant was allowed to approach the prince without permission. Still, the child was crying and no one else was near. Eli looked around. The guards who usually stood watch were gone, perhaps called away for a report. The air was silent except for the boy's soft sobs. The janitor hesitated. He knew the rules. Never speak first. Never touch royal property. Never interfere. Then he saw the cause of the crying. A small golden fruit had fallen from a nearby tree, rolled a few feet away, and stopped near Eli's boot. The fruit was bright like a small sun, glowing faintly in the garden light. The solar fruit was sacred, a food only royals could eat. For anyone else, even touching it meant death. The prince reached toward it weakly but was too small to get it. He cried again, whispering something in his alien tongue that sounded like a plea. Eli stood there for a long moment, his heart beating fast. He thought about turning away. He thought about pretending he didn't see anything. But something inside him, that old human instinct to help, wouldn't let him move on. He picked up the fruit. The glow warmed his hand. It felt soft, alive somehow. He turned to the prince, who looked up at him with wide, watery eyes. Eli smiled gently and crouched down to the boy's level. "It's all right, little one," he said softly. "Here, you drop this," he offered the fruit. The prince blinked, surprised. Slowly the boy took it, his tears stopping as he held it close. His tiny voice trembled as he said, "Thank you." The word came in rough human speech, but it was clear enough. Eli's smile grew. "You're welcome, Your Highness," he said. Then he stood, ready to leave before anyone saw. But someone had seen. From the high glass balcony above the garden, Queen Seraphina of Aurelian stood still, her white robes glowing in the morning light. Her golden eyes were fixed on the human below. She had watched the entire thing, the theft, the kindness, the forbidden act. Her face was calm, unreadable, but her voice when it came was cold as ice. "Guards," she said softly. "Execute him." The words carried through the open hall like thunder. Eli froze. For a second, he didn't believe it. Then the garden doors burst open and 2 armored guards rushed in. The prince gasped, clutching the fruit to his chest. "Wait!" Eli tried to explain, but the guards grabbed him by the arms. He was crying. They didn't let him finish. One of them struck his back, forcing him to his knees. The boy screamed, "Stop! Don't hurt him." But no one dared move against the queen's command. Eli looked up, and for a brief moment his eyes met the queen's. She stood far above, still calm, still silent. Then she turned and walked away. As the guards dragged Eli down the long corridor toward the dungeons, whispers began spreading through the palace. Servants peeked from corners, frightened but curious. They whispered to each other. The human touched the royal fruit. He's going to die. He did it for the young prince. In the lower halls, the air grew colder. The golden light of the palace faded into gray stone walls. Eli's wrists burned where the chains held him, but his mind was calm now. He didn't regret what he did. The boy had stopped crying. That was enough. The guards threw him into a small cell in a cube of metal and shadow. The door shut with a loud click. He sat on the floor, breathing slowly. He looked down at his hand, still faintly glowing from the fruit's touch. Hours passed. No one came. The silence was thick. At some point, the small vent above him whispered open, and a tiny drone slipped through. It projected a light. A voice message from one of the palace workers. It was Mira, another human servant, one of the few who ever spoke to him. Eli, her voice said softly. I heard what happened. They say the queen ordered your death. But some of the nobles are talking. They say she hesitated. Maybe she saw something in you. I don't know what will happen, but don't lose hope. The light faded, and the drone left as quietly as it came. Eli sat there in the darkness, thinking of Earth, the oceans, the forests, the sky he would never see again. He thought about how kindness had become a risk in this world, how simple warmth was treated as weakness. Above, in her high chamber, the queen stood before the great window of stars. Her advisors spoke, asking about the sentence, but she said nothing. She was thinking about the human, about the way he had looked at her without fear, the way he had spoken to her son as if they were equals. That night, as the stars turned slowly over the silver city, something small but important began to change in her heart. She didn't know why she had given the order so quickly. Perhaps it was pride, or perhaps she feared the weakness that kindness revealed. Yet the human's face would not leave her mind. Meanwhile, down in the dark cell, Eli whispered to himself, if I could go back, I'd still do it. He didn't know that those quiet words, and that simple act of compassion, would soon shake the empire from its golden throne. The queen would call him before her again, not as a servant, but as something far more dangerous in her world, a human who dared to care. Morning came slowly to the Aurelian palace. The silver towers rose high into a soft golden sky, and the banners of the royal house moved like quiet waves. But inside the palace walls, the air felt heavy. Everyone knew what was going to happen that day. The execution of the human janitor who had broken sacred law. Eli Ward sat in his small metal cell, still wearing his torn gray uniform. His wrists were bruised from the chains, but his eyes were calm. He had not slept much. He had dreamed of the little prince crying, and each time he had seen himself reaching out with the fruit again. He would have done it 1,000 times over. Outside the cell, the guards were preparing. They spoke in low voices, glancing at the human who waited quietly. Strange, one guard whispered. He does not beg. Most of them beg. Maybe he doesn't understand what's coming, another replied. But Eli understood very well. He knew the queen had spoken the word. He just didn't believe mercy was impossible. Somewhere in his heart, a small light of hope remained. At the top of the palace, Queen Seraphina stood before a mirror made of living crystal. Her reflection showed a woman of strength and power, tall, pale, with eyes of gold that saw everything but revealed nothing. Yet this morning her reflection did not feel familiar. She looked tired. Her chief advisor, Lord Zarin, stood behind her. Your Majesty, he said carefully, the human's execution is prepared. The people expect it. If we delay, they may question your rule. She turned slowly, her voice calm. Do they question compassion too? The advisor blinked, unsure how to answer. Mercy is not a custom among us, my queen. Mercy shows weakness. She looked out the window at the shining city below. Then perhaps our strength has become a cage. Zaran bowed his head uneasy. Shall I cancel the order, my queen? She didn't answer. Her gaze drifted to a small golden fruit resting in a bowl on her table, the same kind the human had touched. The glow of it reflected in her eyes, and for the first time, she saw it not as a symbol of royalty, but as something simple, food for a hungry child. At last, she said, Bring the human to the grand hall. I will deliver judgment myself. The grand hall was vast and bright, its ceiling made of glass that showed the endless blue of the Aurelian sky. Thousands gathered, nobles, soldiers, servants, and citizens. They wanted to see the queen's justice. Some came out of curiosity, others out of fear. Eli was led through the middle of the crowd in chains. He walked slowly, his head high, not proud but steady. Around him, people whispered, That is the human who touched the royal fruit. He fed the prince like a father would a child. He'll die for that kindness. At the front of the hall stood the throne, high and golden. The queen sat upon it, her expression unreadable. Beside her stood Prince Oren, small but alert, his young face serious. He had begged to be there, though the court thought it unwise. He wanted to see the man who had been kind to him. The guard stopped Eli before the throne. The hall fell silent. The queen rose. "Eli, ward of earth," she said, her voice echoing through the chamber. "You are charged with breaking royal law. You touched the sacred solar fruit. You interfered with royal blood. Do you deny this?" Eli shook his head. "No, Your Majesty. I did what they say I did." "Do you know the punishment for such a crime?" "Yes, I do." "Then why did you do it?" Her tone was sharp, but her eyes were searching. The crowd leaned forward to hear the answer. Eli's voice was quiet, but it carried across the hall. "The boy was crying," he said. "He was hungry and alone. I didn't think about laws. I thought about a child who needed help. I gave him the fruit because no one else did." Murmurs swept through the crowd. The aliens looked at each other, confused. They were not used to such simple reasoning. The queen's gaze stayed fixed on him. "You defied my law because of compassion?" "Yes," Eli said. "Where I come from, kindness isn't defiance." For a long moment, silence filled the hall. The queen's expression softened slightly, but she hid it quickly. Lord Zoran stepped forward. "Your Majesty, mercy for this human would show weakness before the court. The people must see the law upheld." Before she could answer, a small voice interrupted. "Mother," said Prince Oren, stepping forward. "Please don't hurt him." The hall gasped. The boy's voice was clear, trembling but brave. "He didn't mean to do wrong," the prince continued. "He helped me when no one else would. I was crying and the guards just watched. He gave me the fruit. I wasn't afraid of him. He was kind." The queen looked down at her son, the heir of her empire, standing in front of everyone, pleading for a human. Her heart moved in a way it hadn't in years. She turned back to Eli. "You have caused great unrest," she said. "Your act has made my court question what is right and what is law. Tell me, human, what do you believe justice should be?" Eli took a slow breath. "Justice should make the world better, not colder. If mercy is a crime here, then maybe your empire has forgotten something important." His words were simple, but they struck deep. The hall was silent again. The queen's fingers tightened on the arm of her throne. The golden fruit on the table beside her seemed to glow brighter. Finally, she stood. "Release him." The words echoed across the room. The guards froze, unsure if they had heard correctly. "Your Majesty?" Lord Zoran stammered. "I said release him," she repeated firmly. "This human broke a rule, but he reminded us of something we have lost. Compassion." The guards unlocked the chains. Eli stood free, rubbing his wrists in disbelief. The crowd whispered in shock. The queen looked at him again. "Eli Ward, you will not die today. Instead, you will live, and you will teach our servants and soldiers the ways of human empathy. You will show them what kindness means." Eli bowed his head deeply. "Thank you, Your Majesty." She stepped closer, lowering her voice so only he could hear. "Do not thank me," she said softly. "You showed me what I had forgotten. Mercy is harder than cruelty." Then she turned to the court. "Let this be known across Aurelian. Kindness is not a weakness. It is strength of another kind." The nobles bowed, some uncertain, others moved. The prince smiled brightly, running to hug his mother's arm. The queen touched his hair gently, her eyes soft with a warmth few had ever seen in her before. Eli stood there, free but humbled. He didn't feel like a hero. He was just a man who couldn't watch a child cry. Yet that small act had shaken an empire that ruled 100 worlds. In the days that followed, word of the Queen's mercy spread across the stars. Some called it foolish, others called it brave. But everywhere the story traveled, it carried the same lesson, that one human's simple kindness had changed the heart of a queen. Eli became the palace's human ethics instructor, a strange new title in a place that once saw humans as nothing more than servants. He taught lessons about understanding, patience, and empathy. Some Aurelians resisted, but others listened. The queen often watched from afar, her eyes thoughtful. One evening, as the sun set over the crystal city, the queen met Eli in the same garden where it all began. The prince played nearby, laughing among the trees. The queen looked at Eli and said, "When you gave my son that fruit, you risked everything." "Why?" Eli smiled faintly. Because he reminded me of my own child. I lost her long ago on Earth. I couldn't ignore his tears. The Queen nodded slowly, understanding. Then perhaps mercy is not weakness after all. Perhaps it is memory, the part of us that still feels. They stood in silence for a while, watching the prince chase the golden light among the trees. In that quiet moment, the empire of Aurelian, built on pride and cold perfection, began to change. Not through war or rebellion, but through the quiet power of a single, human act. And so the story of Eli Ward, the janitor who gave one forbidden fruit, lived on, a story whispered from planet to planet, reminding all beings that sometimes the smallest kindness can reach farther than the brightest star.